The Battle of Arausio in 105 BC stands as one of the darkest and most catastrophic defeats in the history of the Roman Republic. It was a day when arrogance, political rivalry, and poor coordination among the Roman commanders led to the annihilation of nearly 80,000 Roman soldiers by the migrating Germanic Cimbri tribe and their allies, the Teutones. The disaster at Arausio shocked the Roman world to its core, exposing the weaknesses of the Republic's military structure and command system, and forcing Rome to confront an existential threat that seemed capable of sweeping away the entire Italian peninsula. It also paved the way for the rise of one of Rome's most brilliant generals, Gaius Marius, whose military reforms would shape the Roman army for centuries to come. To understand the magnitude of the catastrophe, one must first look at the background that led to it. The Cimbri were a large tribe of northern people, possibly from the Jutland Peninsula, who began moving southward in search of new lands. Accompanied by their allies, the Teutones and Ambrones, they were not an organized army in the modern sense, but rather a vast migration of men, women, and children, traveling with wagons, livestock, and their entire society. When they first encountered Roman forces around 113 BC in Noricum, the Romans underestimated them, viewing them as mere barbarian wanderers. However, the Cimbri proved themselves formidable in battle, defeating several Roman armies over the following years. By 105 BC, the Roman Senate had become desperate to halt the northern invaders. The Republic sent two armies into southern Gaul, near the Rhone River, under the command of proconsul Quintus Servilius Scipio and consul Gnaeus Mallius Maximus. From the beginning, their relationship was poisoned by rivalry and contempt. Scipio, a member of the patrician class, despised Mallius Maximus, a new man from a less distinguished family. The Roman Republic at this time was deeply divided between the elite patricians and the rising plebeian class, and that division often extended into the battlefield, with tragic consequences. Scipio refused to cooperate with Mallius, even though their combined strength was the only chance Rome had of defeating the vast Cimbric host. The Cimbri, for their part, were encamped near the town of Arausio, known today as Orange in southern France. They had sent emissaries to negotiate with the Romans, possibly seeking peace or land to settle on. Mallius was open to hearing their proposals, understanding that a peaceful solution could save countless lives, but Scipio viewed any negotiation with barbarians as dishonorable. He refused to allow his troops to cooperate with Mallius's army or even share supplies. Each Roman commander set up his own camp along the Rhone River, separated by miles of distance. Between them lay the Cimbri, who could see all too clearly the disunity of their opponents. As tensions rose, Scipio took the reckless decision to attack the Cimbri without waiting for Mallius. He may have believed that by striking first, he could win a great personal victory and claim the glory for himself. In the early morning, his troops crossed the river and assaulted the Cimbric camp, but the Cimbri were well prepared and outnumbered the Romans several times over. They counterattacked with ferocious strength. Their warriors, tall and fierce, wielded long spears and heavy swords, and their massive wooden shields clashed like thunder as they charged into the Roman ranks. Scipio's army quickly collapsed. Thousands were slaughtered as they fled back toward the river. The survivors who tried to swim across were cut down or drowned under the weight of their armor. When Mallius saw the devastation, he tried to rally his own men to defend their camp, but the Cimbri pressed the attack relentlessly. The panic spread like wildfire through the Roman ranks. Soldiers abandoned their standards and fled in every direction, pursued by the enemy. The Cimbri showed no mercy. They massacred not only the Roman soldiers but also the camp followers and servants who accompanied the legions. The river Rhone turned red with blood, and the plain around Arausio was littered with bodies. Ancient sources report that up to 80,000 Roman soldiers were killed, along with 40,000 auxiliaries and non-combatants. It was a slaughter on an unimaginable scale, worse than any defeat Rome had suffered since Cannae in 216 BC. In the aftermath of the battle, the Roman Republic was plunged into mourning and fear. The loss of so many soldiers crippled the armies in Gaul and left the northern frontiers open to invasion. The Senate, stunned by the scale of the defeat, declared days of mourning and ordered investigations into the causes of the disaster. Scipio and Mallius both faced public outrage. Scipio, who was widely blamed for the catastrophe, was later stripped of his command and exiled. His arrogance and refusal to cooperate with a fellow Roman commander had doomed an entire army. Mallius, too, suffered disgrace, though his role was less direct. Cimbri, however, did not immediately march into Italy. Instead, they turned westward into Spain, giving Rome precious time to recover. This unexpected delay became the Republic's salvation. In Rome, the Senate recognized the urgent need for reform. They turned to Gaius Marius, the hero of the Jugurthan War in North Africa, a skilled general with a reputation for discipline and innovation. Marius was elected consul and tasked with rebuilding the Roman army from the ruins left at Arausio. Marius understood that the Roman military system was outdated. Until then, soldiers were required to own property to serve, which limited recruitment to the wealthier classes. After Arausio, there simply weren't enough qualified men left to fill the ranks. Marius broke with tradition and opened the army to the Capite Censi, the poorest citizens who owned no land. He trained them into professional soldiers, loyal not to the Senate but to their commander. This reform not only saved Rome in the short term, but also set in motion the long-term transformation of the Roman Republic into an empire led by powerful generals. The memory of Arausio haunted the Roman psyche for generations. It became a symbol of what happens when pride and division overcome discipline and unity. Roman historians like Livy and Orosius later described it as a lesson written in blood, a reminder that the Republic's survival depended on cooperation and leadership rather than personal ambition. The soldiers who perished there were mourned as martyrs to Roman folly. Temples were filled with offerings, and families across Italy wept for sons, brothers, and fathers who would never return. Archaeological evidence suggests that the battlefield near Orange may still contain remnants of the disaster. Weapons, bones, and fragments of Roman equipment scattered across the plain. The site itself remains a silent witness to the horror that unfolded there more than 2,000 years ago. The Cimbri, victorious but still restless, continued their wanderings through Gaul and Spain, clashing with various tribes before eventually returning toward the Alps. It would not be until several years later that Marius would meet and defeat them at the battles of Aquae Sextiae and Vercelli, restoring Roman honor and avenging Arausio. The cultural and political consequences of Arausio were profound. The defeat exposed the corruption and inefficiency of the Roman command system. The Senate had allowed political considerations to dictate military appointments, placing uncooperative rivals in charge of separate armies. The disaster forced the Republic to reconsider how it organized and managed its forces. In many ways, Arausio served as the catalyst for the professionalization of the Roman military. Without that catastrophe, Marius might never have been given the mandate to reform the army so radically. For the ordinary Roman citizen, Arausio was more than just a military defeat. It was a psychological wound. Rumors spread that the gods had abandoned Rome. Temples were filled with sacrifices and prayers for protection from the barbarian threat. The idea that an entire Roman army, legions of disciplined, battle-hardened soldiers, could be annihilated by tribes once dismissed as savages challenged the very foundations of Roman identity. Yet from the ashes of that defeat arose a new determination. The Roman people resolved that such a disaster would never happen again. In the years that followed, Marius's reformed army grew stronger and more cohesive. When the Cimbri and Teutones returned toward Italy around 102–101 BC, they encountered a Rome transformed. Marius's legions were disciplined, loyal, and capable of maneuvering with deadly precision. At the Battle of Aquae Sextiae, Marius crushed the Teutones, capturing or killing tens of thousands. A year later, at Vercelli, he annihilated the Cimbri, avenging the fallen of Arausio and restoring the glory of Rome. The victory made Marius the most celebrated general of his age and ensured that the names of Arausio and Vercelli would forever be linked, one a symbol of despair, the other of redemption. Looking back, the Battle of Arausio remains a cautionary tale about leadership, unity, and the price of arrogance. It demonstrated that even the most powerful republic could fall victim to its own internal divisions. Rome's political rivalries had allowed personal ambition to override the common good, and tens of thousands paid with their lives. Yet, paradoxically, it was that very disaster that forced the republic to evolve. The professional army that emerged from Marius's reforms would go on to conquer vast territories and defend the empire for centuries. But it would also shift loyalty from the state to individual generals, laying the groundwork for the eventual collapse of the republic itself. In that sense, Arausio marked both an end and a beginning. It ended the era of the old citizen-soldier army and the illusion that the republic's institutions were infallible. But it also began a new chapter in Roman history, one of innovation, militarization, and transformation. The ghosts of Arausio may have haunted Rome, but they also whispered lessons that shaped the destiny of the ancient world. Today, when historians and archaeologists discuss Arausio, they often compare it to later disasters such as the Teutoburg Forest or Carrhae. Yet, unlike those later defeats, Arausio did not destroy Roman expansion, it redefined it. The scale of loss was so immense that it forced a reckoning in every corner of Roman society. The Senate, the people, and the generals all came to understand that survival required unity, discipline, and adaptation. Without Arausio, Rome might never have produced the resilient military machine that later dominated the Mediterranean world. Thus, the plains near modern-day Orange hold more than just the memory of slaughter. They represent a turning point in human history, where the arrogance of a few men led to the destruction of many, but also where the lessons of that tragedy forged the backbone of one of history's greatest empires. The story of Arausio endures as a timeless reminder that pride and division are the true enemies of any nation, and that even in the shadow of annihilation, the seeds of renewal can be sown. Background of the Cimbri and Teutones migration. The Cimbri and Teutones were tribes from northern Europe, likely originating in the Jutland Peninsula, modern Denmark. Around the late 2nd century BC, they began migrating southward in search of new lands due to overpopulation, climate change, or pressure from neighboring tribes. Unlike traditional armies, they traveled with families, wagons, and livestock, forming a massive moving community. To the Romans, such a migration seemed strange and threatening, as it brought an entire people into their sphere of influence. Initially, the Romans viewed them as primitive wanderers, not realizing the immense military capability of these tribes. Their movements through Gaul and beyond would eventually bring them into direct conflict with Roman expansion, setting the stage for one of Rome's greatest disasters. Early Roman encounters with the Cimbri. The Romans first clashed with the Cimbri in 113 BC near Noricum, modern Austria. Confident in their superiority, they underestimated the size and determination of the tribes. The encounter ended in a Roman defeat, shocking the Senate and revealing that these so-called barbarians were capable of organized and devastating warfare. Over the next several years, Roman forces attempted to contain the migrating Cimbri and their allies, the Teutones and Ambrones, but suffered repeated setbacks. The tribes moved unpredictably, often vanishing into the vast lands of Gaul before reappearing elsewhere. These early encounters exposed weaknesses in Roman strategy and command structure, but political arrogance prevented real reform. By 105 BC, the stage was set for an even greater confrontation near Arausio. Political and social tensions in Rome. During this period, Rome was plagued by political infighting between the conservative patricians and the ambitious plebeians seeking power. The republic's leadership positions were often granted through political favoritism rather than merit. Ambition, pride, and rivalry among senators frequently influenced military appointments. As a result, the army suffered from poor coordination and divided authority. Commanders often prioritized personal glory over collective success. These tensions were embodied in the relationship between Quintus Servilius Scipio, a proud patrician, and Gnaeus Mallius Maximus, a new man from a lesser family. Their personal hostility mirrored the class conflict tearing at the Republic's foundations. This division would prove fatal when both were assigned to lead separate armies against the advancing Cimbri, with disastrous consequences. Appointment of Quintus Servilius Scipio and Gnaeus Mallius Maximus. To counter the Cimbric threat, Rome dispatched two large armies under proconsul Quintus Servilius Scipio and consul Gnaeus Mallius Maximus. Scipio, an aristocrat of noble birth, despised his co-commander Mallius, whose rise came from merit rather than lineage. This arrogance created a toxic rivalry that overshadowed military priorities. Instead of cooperating to face the massive Cimbric host, both leaders maintained separate camps, issued conflicting orders, and refused to share intelligence or supplies. Scipio refused even to acknowledge Mallius's authority as consul, a grave breach of discipline. The Senate, aware of this tension, failed to intervene decisively. This dual command structure, poisoned by class arrogance, ensured that when the Cimbri finally attacked, the Roman forces would fight as two divided armies rather than one united front. Arrival of Roman armies near Arausio. In 105 BC, the Roman armies advanced into southern Gaul, establishing positions along the Rhone River near the town of Arausio, modern Orange, France. The area offered open plains suitable for battle and easy access to water, but it also left little room for retreat if things went wrong. The Cimbri and their allies camped nearby with an enormous force, men, women, and children stretching across miles of territory. The Romans could see their immense numbers but still underestimated them. Instead of forming a unified strategy, Scipio and Mallius established separate camps on opposite sides of the river, effectively isolating their forces. This decision would prove disastrous, as it allowed the Cimbri to exploit Roman disunity and choose the time and place of the coming battle. Refusal of cooperation between Scipio and Mallius. The fatal flaw of the Roman campaign at Arausio lay in the commander's refusal to cooperate. Mallius, recognizing the danger, attempted to meet with Scipio and coordinate their efforts. Scipio rejected the proposal, reportedly calling him a low-born fool. Their armies remained encamped miles apart, unable to support each other. The Cimbri, observing this division, saw an opportunity to strike. Even when the enemy began moving between the Roman positions, neither commander was willing to concede leadership. Scipio went as far as to forbid his troops from supplying Mallius's camp. This stubbornness left the Romans vulnerable to isolation and ambush. The internal discord among their leaders doomed them before a single sword was drawn, turning arrogance into a death sentence for tens of thousands. Cimbri diplomatic overtures. Before the fighting began, the Cimbri reportedly sent envoys to negotiate with the Romans. Their demands were not unreasonable. They sought land where their people could settle peacefully within Roman territories, possibly as allies. Mallius was inclined to hear them out, understanding the potential to avoid bloodshed. Scipio, however, saw such talks as a humiliation for Rome. He dismissed the emissaries, publicly insulting them and rejecting any form of diplomacy. This act enraged the Cimbri, who saw it as betrayal and dishonor. The moment for peaceful resolution was lost forever. By scorning negotiation, the Romans invited annihilation. The Cimbri prepared for war, determined to destroy the arrogant invaders who had mocked their good faith and threatened their survival. Scipio's reckless preemptive attack. Unable to bear sharing glory with Mallius, Scipio launched a premature attack against the Cimbric camp, hoping to claim victory alone. His forces crossed the river at dawn, advancing toward the Cimbri lines in poor formation and without support. At first, his soldiers made some progress against scattered outposts, but soon the full weight of the Cimbric army descended upon them. The tribes fought with ferocity, wielding long spears and heavy shields. The Romans, caught off guard and outnumbered, quickly lost cohesion. Within hours, Scipio's legions were overrun, and chaos consumed the battlefield. Thousands were cut down as they tried to retreat toward the river. Those who attempted to swim across drowned under the weight of their armor or were slaughtered on the banks. The Cimbri counterattack and destruction of Scipio's army. Once Scipio's army collapsed, the Cimbri turned their fury toward Mallius's forces, still encamped nearby. The survivors from Scipio's side fled in panic, spreading terror as they reached the second camp. The Cimbri advanced relentlessly, their war cries echoing across the plains. Mallius attempted to form defensive lines, but his demoralized troops were overwhelmed by the sight of tens of thousands of enemy warriors charging in waves. The Romans were trapped between the river and the Cimbric onslaught. Their formations broke, and panic became total. The discipline that once defined Roman legions vanished as soldiers threw away their weapons and fled. By nightfall, both Roman camps were burning, and the Cimbri stood victorious amid the corpses of more than 80,000 men. Total annihilation of Roman forces. The slaughter at Arausio was complete. Ancient historians describe it as one of the bloodiest days in Roman history. Nearly 80,000 Roman soldiers and 40,000 auxiliaries, servants and followers were killed. The river Rhone ran red with blood as thousands drowned trying to escape. The Cimbri showed no mercy, executing prisoners and looting the Roman camps. The disaster was so immense that entire legions ceased to exist, their standards lost forever. Rome's northern frontier was left defenseless, and the Republic itself trembled in fear. The magnitude of the defeat rivaled that of Cannae 2 centuries earlier. The people of Rome were struck with disbelief. Their proud armies, symbols of invincibility, had been erased in a single day. Aftermath in Rome. When news of the defeat reached Rome, panic swept the Republic. The Senate declared days of mourning, temples were crowded with sacrifices, and rumors spread that the gods had abandoned Rome. Scipio and Mallius were recalled in disgrace. Scipio faced trial, accused of insubordination and incompetence. His wealth was confiscated, and he was eventually exiled, dying in obscurity. The Republic's military confidence was shattered, and recruitment collapsed as fear spread among the citizens. Political unrest deepened, with the people demanding reform and accountability. The disaster at Arausio exposed the moral decay within the Republic's leadership. Yet, amidst the despair, a glimmer of hope appeared, a general who would rebuild Rome's strength and avenge its humiliation. Gaius Marius. Rise of Gaius Marius and military reforms. In the aftermath of Arausio, the Roman Senate turned to Gaius Marius. Already celebrated for his victories in North Africa, Marius recognized that the traditional Roman army, composed of property-owning citizens, could no longer sustain the Republic's military needs. He introduced sweeping reforms, allowing the poorest citizens to enlist and making the army a professional career force. Training became standardized, discipline tightened, and soldiers were equipped at the state's expense. Loyalty shifted from the Senate to the general who commanded them. These reforms not only saved Rome but transformed it. Marius's new army was more flexible, efficient, and capable of confronting large tribal forces like the Cimbri. The catastrophe at Arausio thus became the catalyst for Rome's military modernization. Psychological and cultural impact on Roman society. The defeat at Arausio left a deep scar on the Roman psyche. It was more than a military loss, it was a spiritual and cultural trauma. For generations, Romans believed their armies were favored by the gods and destined to rule the world. Arausio shattered that illusion. Fear gripped the people as rumors spread that divine wrath had punished Rome for arrogance and corruption. Families mourned sons who would never return, and the Senate was forced to confront its moral failings. The event became a moral lesson, retold by historians as a warning against pride and disunity. Yet out of this despair emerged a renewed determination to reform and strengthen the Republic, ensuring such a tragedy would never repeat. Future Roman revenge and restoration. Several years after Arausio, the Cimbri and Teutones returned toward Italy, expecting easy conquest. Instead, they faced a reformed and disciplined Roman army under Gaius Marius. In 102 BC, at Aquae, Marius annihilated the Teutones, capturing thousands. The following year, at the Battle of Arausio, he crushed the Cimbri in northern Italy, slaughtering their warriors and capturing their families. These victories avenged the humiliation of Arausio and restored Roman pride. Marius was hailed as the savior of the Republic and a second founder of Rome. The ghosts of Arausio were finally laid to rest, but the memory of that terrible defeat continued to shape Roman strategy, emphasizing unity, discipline, and the importance of capable leadership. Legacy and lessons of Arausio. The Battle of Arausio stands as one of history's greatest lessons in leadership failure and military arrogance. It revealed how personal rivalry and political division could destroy even the most powerful army. Yet it also led to rebirth. The reforms of Marius, born from Arausio's ashes, laid the foundation for Rome's imperial greatness. The professional army that emerged would defend the Republic and later serve the empire for centuries. Still, it carried a hidden cost: soldiers. Loyalty shifted from the state to their generals, paving the way for future civil wars. Arausio thus marked both an ending and a beginning, the death of the old Republic's ideals and the birth of the militarized Rome that would dominate the ancient world.